And yeah, like I said, I'm just going to go straight into it today because I've been looking forward to speaking to you. Oh, by the way, can I call you? So, firstly, have I pronounced your name right? Natsune? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Oh, yeah. Wow. I'm really happy because usually a lot of people mess up for the first time. So you got it perfectly.
And do you prefer that or Nana?
Natsune. Natsune.
Natsune.
Yeah.
Natsune. Okay.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll call you Natsune throughout. And like I just said to you, I've been reading your book, The Game of Self-Domination, and I've been enjoying it. Something struck a chord with me very early on, and something that we have in common is that we're both James Altucher fans. So James Altucher was a big inspiration, or has been a big inspiration in my life for many years.
Oh, good.
I stumbled across his writing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say 7 years ago, and actually I saw him in one of his rare appearances over here in the UK,
Oh, nice.
and
Mm.
so I was really lucky. And as soon as I saw that in your writing, I was like, okay, I know if for anyone that's a James Altucher fan out there, I think if you enjoy his style of writing, you've probably done a lot of self-analysis and self-development over the years, and it really draws that out of you. So I was pleased to see that.
Good. Thank
And
you.
now the link here is that now you're a writer and a fully fledged author yourself. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How does it feel having someone say that you're an author, and now that your book's released, how does that feel?
Like honestly, I'm the kind of person who doesn't necessarily put too much value on statuses. So I don't necessarily feel anything different. But what I care more about is like outcome, like what am I producing to the world? Like, because in the core, I understand that I don't mean anything. Like I'm just here to kind of create whatever I can create that's good cause for other people, and that's the best I can do, right? So when I start playing the game of I'm the smartest one, I'm the successful one, I'm the richest one, whatever, like that's a wrong game to play, I noticed. So I don't necessarily value on the statuses as much as I used to.
What do you value? And by the way, just to introduce you and your background quickly.
Yeah.
So you're the host at LifeUpEducationTV.com. In terms of what people can find from you, I would say it's very much self-motivational, personal development, and just motivational content. That's what I've seen from you. I see a lot of your TikTok content come up on
nice.
on my LinkedIn feed, actually, in particular. So I think you repurposed repurpose that there. And obviously, as I said to you before we started recording, I've been reading your book as well. But how would you describe yourself to someone?
Yeah, well, I'm a host at Life Up Education TV, which I'm going to get to it a little bit more to explain what it is. I'm also an entrepreneur in Tokyo. I have a company called Foreign Connect, where I help Japanese businesses to enter American market by connecting them with local businesses in America. And then also I coordinate the projects between the two parties. So that's a very quick description of Foreign Connect, my other venture. And then for Life Up Education TV, I'm a host and the author. And my book's name is called The Game of Self-Domination. The theme of the show, the purpose of the show. So once again, coming back to what I was speaking of a little bit earlier, I came to the conclusion that I don't mean anything too much, right? Like my life, even if I try so hard, my life cannot mean much. Like me as a person cannot mean anything that greatly. But what I can mean is the idea or is the intent that I'm creating to the world. So the purpose of life is not predicated on me, but rather the impact I can create to the world. And for me, oftentimes how I describe is I say there's no purpose in life. The ultimate purpose in life is to live the life totally. For me, the way I can live my life in a total sense, it's making progress in humanity. I'm a very macro thinker, so I look at the world from the frame of like a 200 minus years and then 200 years later from now. Like that's the kind of time scale that I use to look at the world. And when I look at the world from that time frame, I can't stop wondering, like, what could be the ultimate meaning I can, try to maximize to leave when I leave this earth, right? And I come to this conclusion that I want to contribute to create progress in humanity. I want to be a part of the driver that's going to allow human to challenge our limit and create out of our creativity to make progress in going into the next generation. Actually, as you read more toward the end of the book, actually, I have a couple of poems. One of them actually I found from this historical Native American warrior. He talks about like how really like the core of the purpose of life, and it's very beautiful. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And also there's a speech from Steve Jobs when he spoke at the California University, and he was speaking about life as a circulation. So meaning that everything should be in circulation. If you make a lot of money, your life can mean something only if you can give what you made. And then the same thing, you can say that for love, same thing you can say that for happiness, same thing you can say that for knowledge, information, anything. Everything should be circulation. You make a lot, you collect a lot, and you give back a lot. And that's the only way you can truly feel the sense of fulfillment, feel the sense of satisfaction, happiness. So sorry, kind of I went off track, but
No, that's good. I'm listening to you speak, and there are some key messages, and I've got so many questions that I want to ask you already.
Oh, okay.
So that's good.
Yeah. Sorry. Let me finish real quick about life.
Yeah, you finish.
So the mission of Life Up Education TV is basically, so given all that as a backstory, I want to create a media channel that, so I came to this conclusion that for me, the ultimate purpose of my life is to contribute for the humanity, progress of the humanity. What blocks our humanity? Well, what blocks our creativity to expand our form of humanity is our mindset and mental block, and then I guess creativity blocks, right? And people cannot strive or cannot be innovative and more creative when we are in the state of scarcity. The opposite of scarcity is abundance. And abundance can come from the ultimate appreciation, gratitude, love. I watch a lot of videos on Facebook. Well, they pop up on my feed often. But, I see a lot of dogs of shelter dogs. I see a lot of videos of shelter dogs, right?
Yeah.
So, Facebook learned that I enjoy that kind of content. So it shows me a lot of those. And, one other thing I really feel when I watch, one of those videos is, love is so important. Like, love is what gives people and all livings, for that matter, the ultimate driver and motivation, or even hope and faith for us to keep striving in life when shit gets hard, right? And I want to create that ultimate feeling. And love, the way I define it, is the unconditional willingness. So self-love, the same thing. Like, when everyone in this world would be against me, I'm gonna be there for myself. I'm never gonna give up on my dream. I'm gonna be there for myself. So that's self-love. I'm never gonna give up on my dream, even if anyone in this world, like everyone, gives me shit for my idea. I'm never gonna give up on my dream. That's a love for your dream, right? Like, so that's the ultimate term or definition, how I describe what love is. So the same thing can apply. I think humans and all livings, for that matter, once again, we need that kind of sense in order for us to strive and keep raising the faith into ourselves and into our idea. So the purpose of Life Up Education TV lays there. I want to create a platform that spreads the message of love, spread the message of, if you fuck it up, like, don't worry, don't dwell, just do. Like, just create more and make more opportunity. Like, we are not interested in our past. We're interested in progress. We're interested in future. We're interested in challenging our limits. We are interested in making progress as a humanity. So I want to do that at the, I guess, micro scale, I guess, to develop relationship one-on-one with people and really just show them these messages. And then really, I want to develop a relationship one-on-one, but I want to use the internet as a tool so that I can do it at scale, like a bigger scale, macro.
There is so much that I could unpick from what you've said. There is so much that I can think about and reflect on there. So a couple of things that come to mind, because I think that's an amazing intro and an amazing mission that you're on.
Thank you. But I mean, you're doing very similar things, so I want to appreciate you for that as well.
Yeah, there's so much to what you've just said. I guess the first thing I'm interested in, well, I guess as I digest what you just say, so you talked about being less interested in status as you once were and more interested in intent. That's the number one thing that stood out to me. And then you also, which I want to speak about, you talked about creating an intent that lives far beyond your physical life. So the intent carries forward to the next generation. So that's also interesting to me. And then you talked there's a third thing that you said, which is doing this as much for yourself as for other people. So your mission being for yourself as much for other people. And actually, that's just the point I want to maybe start with is where. So it's so interesting to me, how people end up this way. So what gives you this motivation? Was there one scenario, like one trigger that made you think, oh, I really need to think differently about life, and this is my goal moving forward in life? Or was it a combination of things that you started to see and a combination of scenarios? Do you know where that comes from?
I think my life is because of what I'm interested in, who I am characteristic wise, right? Like I have a very high sense of self-awareness. And one other thing I know about me is that I'm very adventurous and I'm very courageous. So I tend to go in a direction, like as I navigate through life, I tend to just follow instinct a little bit more than others. And I tend to go into the direction where people aren't able to go because they're afraid. Like I tend to go there intentionally, right? Like with initiation. And when you are in that position, you become a lot more vulnerable to uncertainty. You become a lot more vulnerable to just changes, uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I guess the whole life, it gave me opportunity for me to practice different ways of thinking. I guess practice coming up with different ways of thinking, right? Because my life, so to speak, my life can be unstable. So I needed to like really find out a way where I could be stable within my mind. So I had to like create different shifts in how I look at life. And then ultimately that's where my conclusion laid. And then I guess the 3 points that you made kind of all interconnects to one. And actually, before I going into that, I have another quote that I wanted to share because I thought it was very interesting. So, connecting back to what I just said, there's another person I recently came across who said something interesting. He said, if you're smart in life, you're confused. If you're stupid in life, you're confused. So both are in either cases, you're confused. And in life, what's important is not to figure your confusion out because it's impossible. But in life, instead, what you want to aim for is to figure out how to use your confusion to your benefit. And I very much resonate with that because, once again, coming back to your point, I don't know if I'm correct or wrong, right? And very quite frankly, that's not my focus at all. Like, I don't care if I'm wrong. What I care about is I care about productivity. I care about practicality. So whatever it is, the insight I have, I don't care if I'm wrong or if I'm correct. Like, it doesn't matter to me. If I don't produce anything, it doesn't matter. Like, right? So I'm a very I put really high value in productivity. So I don't care about like how I appear, but instead, even if something doesn't make sense, if that gives me the reason for me to strive, if that gives me the reason for me to produce, I'd rather believe that mm, over like trying to be correct, however, being unproductive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's clear. The thing that I'm thinking about there is you touched on self-awareness.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is born from self-awareness. And what I'm trying to establish here, was there ever a moment where you looked around a room? I've had this, I can't think off the top of my head, but I've had this where I've looked around the room and I thought, am I crazy here? Because I feel like really aware all of the time of what's happening. I'm very observational, and I study that a lot. And I'm also quite introverted, so I think about myself a lot, not selfishly, just I guess nervously more than anything. So I've always felt that way. I've always felt like I've self-analyzed. Have you ever had a moment like that where you've been looking around the room or anything that's triggered that self-awareness? Did it come from a young age? Did it come more recently? When did that come?
I don't think there was like any moment where I went on a room and felt the same way, but I think it was a gradual process. And yeah, there has been definitely some triggers. I wouldn't say like a one event, but multiple events that gave me different insights. For example, like I intentionally wanted to experience different kinds of lifestyle, right? And at one point, I put myself in a position where, basically I had access to what the commercialized definition of success would look like, basically, right? Like you would have parties on the very like luxurious places, and you have this like a super huge condo or whatever, right? Like, or you have this like beautiful pool like at the house, and I don't know how to, but anyway, so you know what I mean, right? Like it's this regular, and then I noticed how unhappy I was. I wasn't happy at all, and at that time I was always looking for outside of what was wrong, right? Like I always had a reason why I wasn't happy, and that was predicated on based on what I didn't have, and then that came from outside. But one day I just did it for a long time and noticed that I never improved internally, regardless of how much more I gained materialistically, right? And then I noticed that I had to do a little bit more deeper internal like soul searching for me to, I guess, get out of this suffer. So at one point, and also it was coming to the point where I was getting ready to move back to Japan, and my new life was about to start. So I basically, took a paper and pen and then just started writing on things I had in my mind. And yeah, I would say maybe that would be one of the closest resonation I can come up with.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think so. Sometimes I think that there are triggers that cause people to look at life differently. And then sometimes I think it's something that's just characteristic, something that's within someone. But
Right.
what I'm interested to know from your perspective is, do you think that self-awareness can be taught?
I think so. But for me, my thing is like you said, like there's a momentum and decisiveness commitment required, because the biggest thing you can get out of get out of commitment is basically you deciding something, right? And that's all about it. But I think the actual work is continuous. You can't just like, there's no formula, there's no success formula you can apply and immediately you become successful. Like everything takes time, everything takes work. If you're not willing to do the work, you can't. Even if you have the commitment, if you're not willing to work, you can't get it. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. Actually, from what I've known, the experience. So I'm not a big believer of like there's a lot of marketer who sells like, this is success formula. This is like the
Yeah.
ultimate, like a secret for you to become a billionaire. And then if you approach to money from that perspective, you're never gonna have enough patience to even deploy that, whatever you're buying. So I don't particularly believe in like, one time and you're good, right? Like life is continuous. You have to keep growing. So I think same concept applies, even for any skill acquisition. So including self-awareness. I mean, it's just the decisiveness. If you want to have it, you decide. And if you suck at it, you just have to keep going if you really want it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And for someone that's self-aware like yourself and who studied self-awareness and studied this aspect of life, do you still, I assume, practice? And I know from your book you have frameworks where you can study and essentially realign yourself with your goals and your center and make sure you don't drift too far. But do you still have those moments where you drift a little bit away from your goal or your self-awareness and have to pull yourself back in?
I don't think so. Like for me, it's more like micro view of myself changes daily. Yes. Depending on,
Right.
My bank account, depending on, different situations in life, it changes. It's like adaptability, and it's also flexibility that any business owner have to have in order for them to survive. But at macro, like my vision doesn't, like I'm so clear, I'm so set with that. It's just like fully resonate with me for too long of a time. Like stably, that I just can't think of any other thing I want to do. So at the macro scale, no. And actually, it's interesting that you brought it up. One of the exercises I included in my book actually asks you to do this goal setting every day. And that's actually what I do in order for me to keep aligning with my goals and ambition. And I used to wrote down goals that was very like a material. I wouldn't say very, but some more like a tangible, right? Like tangible and more materialistics. Like such as I would say, like I want to live this place, I want to go this place, or I want to make this much money, or stuff like that. But now my diary looks a lot different. My first line always every day is I say I want to make people laugh, I want to make people feel loved, I want to make people feel worthy, I want to make like the real thing the real impact I can make. So this is my first line every day in my goal note.
That's a really good way of thinking about it, because a lot of people start their day and they start with a things to do list. But maybe I've not really thought about it this way, but maybe it's a good time to think about, maybe you start your day with a things to feel list or a things to give list. Maybe that's a good way of doing it, because what you're talking about, going full circle to what you said in the intro, is you're focusing your day focused on the intent, not the actual thing that you're doing.
Oh, but I do both though. Like I definitely have to do list following from that list, but I guess I'm prioritizing in a different way. Before it used to be, like you said, like it was more like a to-do list, like things to check off. But I wanted to focus on outcome instead of progress, which actually it sounds so weird, like, because I'm a contradiction. I contradict a lot, but that's not to say that that's not negative thing, because life is never about black and white, and that's just our laziness of mind and brain wants to be one side or the other, right? Like our brain likes to automate things. So our brain likes to automate things, so that without you coming in to the system, the brain can process the information automatically like that. And that's just how brain works. However, once again, like if you want to be conscious, if you want to really know what's going on, you have to be present, and you have to be able to tell when to use one side, one side, and when to use the other side, right? So basically, my thing is, I'm contradictory because it works. It's just how life should be. And I think one of the, two reasons, once again, the one is your brain likes to automate. So your brain wants to define things. And then that's the whole purpose of words, right? Like we have words now so that we have definition for things. And then the second thing is insecurity. When you change your opinion too much, like people will judge on you or something, you have like you secretly contain this fear. But it's just life. Like you have
I love changing my opinion. Yeah, I love
like,
it. I used to be very uncomfortable with it, but now I love moments in life where I'm like, oh, I've changed my opinion on that because it means that I've already thought about it.
Exactly. And then it's like practicality. Like this is why I'm a big on productivity and practicality, because practicality is just practical. Practicality is just logical. So I'm not all about, like, as much as my macro sense or the view of the goal attach a lot to more artsy side of this world or artsy side of this life. I deploy everyday practicality. I'm logical. So I don't dwell on the insecurity. I don't dwell on the negative emotion that stops me. Instead, I focus on realistical optimism and just focus on creation.
Yeah, it's really interesting with people that are analytical thinkers or logical thinkers. The danger sometimes is that I've seen this, and I guess I study and read a lot about similar things to you. And one interesting thing I'm going to use the phrase high performers, but people that really study their craft, is that self-analysis or that self-awareness can lead to a lot of self-criticism. So usually the people that are successful can be harder on themselves and think a lot more about themselves and their productivity than anyone else. And that can actually lead to those negative thoughts, lead to conditions like anxiety or depression. There's definitely a close link from what I've seen. So I guess it's really important to have those skills to almost slow your brain down. You know how you said that the brain always wants to kind of autonomously make those decisions and make them really fast. It's almost like sometimes you've got to take control of those thoughts and not overthink situations and not be too self-critical.
And another way to look at it is actually, I like humble approach. And one of the things I realize is you feeling that way about yourself, like you having a very high expectation and being like perfectionist about how you can deliver or who you are, is very egoistic actually. Like if you that's you still making all about everything that you're doing about you. You're not doing for other people. That's why you suffer from it. That's why you suffocate from the idea that like you are not being perfect or you're not be perceived as a perfect figure that you want to create, right? And then that's kind of how I look at it too.
There's a really good book on that kind of topic. I don't know if you've heard or seen it yourself. It's by Ryan Holiday called Ego is the Enemy. And it's about this topic. I agree that, and that's something I've been more conscious of just, I guess, more recently in the last 5 to 10 years of my life, is that that ego comes into play a lot more. Everyone has an ego of some description. They're just different animals. And so it's about knowing what your ego is and what it presents to you, so that you know how you can disarm it. But it comes in all different forms. So yeah, you're right. It's a form of ego to think that, to maybe think that you'll never. Maybe number one, that won't affect you and that self-analysis won't affect you. But number two, to think that you can be so like more productive than anyone else on the planet. You've got to know where your productivity threshold is, I guess, as well. That's also a good challenge of the ego.
Right. And actually someone I was listening to Tony, actually. Do you know Tony Robbins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Tony. I was listening to him and he was describing like how that is actually one of the human nature, right? Just as we talked about. And, the war, for example, around religion works like that because, we all want to feel significance. For example, the war around the religion is about we are fighting over who's more significant to the creator. And that just sits with me a lot because it just made a lot of sense, which I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, that's just to kind of add more context.
And I want to go into the book a little bit more detail in a moment, but there's something else that we talked about right at the beginning when I was breaking down kind of your introduction. And the next thing that I'm interested in, because I struggle with this myself, is you were talking about making sure that each day you follow an intent, so that intent or that energy can outlive you. And I always really struggle. I'm almost scared when I think about the future beyond me and into the future, and like I almost break down. Like my mind goes blank when I start to think too far, because you never know what the future is going to look like, and that can be very exciting and it can be very scary. And funnily enough, this is a really good conversation for me to have, because on this podcast very shortly, I'm going to be recording an episode with someone that has 5 years to live, so they have terminal brain cancer. And so I'm wondering, with I've been worried about that podcast a little bit, and because I don't know how do they think about the future. That's something that I'm going to be talking to them about as well. So how do you feel about that when you think about, I think you used 200 years from now. How do you feel about life in 200 years? Do you think energy from someone can carry on generation to generation?
Yeah. Well, the reason I said 200 years was just to kind of show you that how little the impact of my life is at the individual scale. So to your question, I would say that like in the end of the day, like I just know that how much ever I try, like I cannot mean that significantly. That's not to say that my life wouldn't necessarily have like any meaning whatsoever at all, but that's more to say that like your life is smaller than what you hallucinate in a daily basis. Like, we only experience the world from the body and the mind that we're given to this individual thing, right?
Yeah.
But, and then for me, this thinking is very helpful because, what we experience with this body is so real that sometimes people get stuck in it. And then sometimes people just lose the perspective of, the world is super bigger than you and you're really like too small to the point like you don't need anything, right? And for me, I use the narration in more positive way. I use the narration in the way that allows me to be courageous in life, allows me to do what I want to do in life. And in a lot of mean, it really gives me the courage to be who I am every day basis. So
that's really good. That's a really good skill to kind of keep you motivated and keep you positive each day. So I think what you've just described is really interesting. Are you self-critical? So do you kind of?
I think it's, once again, I pull from two directions at the same time. In the same time, the one side is future, right? Creativity, creation. And then the other side is practicality, more like a micro view of life, everyday basis. So to navigate through this individual life of my lifetime versus future is a mission. A future is my dream. Future is the idea I want to produce in this world. So to me, my past doesn't mean anything, and my failure and losses doesn't mean anything, because I can always produce something. And I don't know, like it's just practicality, like it doesn't produce you, it doesn't help you to produce anything if you keep dwelling on your reasons, excuses, loss and failure, past. So, because I noticed that from practical perspective, which is more micro perspective, as much as my goal is very emotional, like I also pull from the opposite direction enough to the point where I just don't give a fuck about any of those things.
No, that's good. That's kind of the prep talk that I needed as well. It's because I would say that I'm not completely self-deprecating to the point where I think I'm a failure and I suffer with that too much. But I do end the day quite a lot thinking, oh, I do dwell a little bit too much on the things that I haven't done. And I like to consider myself quite productive. But maybe I need, when in those moments, I can't remember who it was, but I was listening to something recently where someone was saying, you know, maybe you have a bad morning and maybe you're not as productive as you think you were going to be, or maybe something sidetracks your goal or whatever you wanted to achieve. And then maybe just set smaller micro goals for yourself. Maybe just say, okay, well, I'll do something in the afternoon, or maybe the afternoon's still there for me to, reclaim some positive energy and do something else for myself, or something else that I wanted to enjoy. And you can even take that down to like the hour mark. You know, maybe this hour hasn't been good, but the next one could be better. So I'm starting to apply that thought process a little bit more, and that's helping me to get through those times where, you know, I feel unproductive. That's a good way. It's a good way.
Yeah. Sorry. I wanted to add something real quick also. Like, speaking of dwelling, like, you know, it's like, once again, practicality. When you look at situation with practicality, right? Like, there's no alternative. Like, what are you going to do about it? I mean, it's done.
Yeah.
You can't change your past. Like, what the fuck? Like, what are you going to do about it, right? So for me, the usage of time is a lot more valuable when you focus on production to the next action, instead of thinking about what you could have done, because there's no alternative. You can't change what has already happened. Like, why are you even still caring about it, right?
And this leads me nicely actually to kind of, I guess, this opening section of this podcast. And I say opening, we've been talking for quite a while now already. I feel like I could speak to you for a couple of hours, but something that I'm interested in is you are quite young, and I was talking to someone recently about ageism in career development on this podcast, and but I think full circle, and maybe you'll answer this for me. I think full circle is, if you're living your life with intent, nobody can really question your intent. So that gives you kind of an unshakable faith in yourself, because it means if anyone does ever question your age, it's not about your age, it's not about your status, it's about the intent that you're trying to give. But I am curious to know, do you ever get that? You are young, you are trying to be motivational. Do you get anyone ever questioning that and your ability to help them?
Yeah, well, more than that, I used to do a lot of like photo shooting and like modeling and stuff. So because of the demographic that I fit into, and I guess stereotypical image that they attach to the profile of me, which is like young woman, sometimes, like, I meet this cynicism, and the way I go against it, or actually I don't even try to go against, but the way I look at it is, I should fail if I suck. I shouldn't fail if I'm not suck. Like, the end, right?
Yeah.
So I don't give a fuck. Like, whatever, you can think of anything about me. Like, I'm gonna so make sure that I'm gonna be good of what I'm delivering, that you're gonna like me eventually. And I have no interest in convincing you, because that's out of my control. Why am I even focusing on things I can't control? Like, I much rather use the same energy and amount of effort and time into producing something I can control and producing more opportunity.
Yeah. Did you have this same kind of approach to life when you were modeling? Are you still modeling as well? Or has now your career changed and developed over time?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't like, that long. So what happened was, I used to have this like clothing company. That's why, like, I did model stuff for me. But at the time, not so much, there's still, I don't know, I think I had a lot more insecurities. But now, like, now I started my other ventures and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, like, I'm just mentally really different place, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, that's a good setup for this next kind of section that I wanted to talk about, is when did your book come into your mind? When was your book born, and how did you decide, I'm going to take all of these ideas and put them into a book? What was your goal? What was your motivation?
Yeah, the very first motivation, well, actually, I was collecting quotes, right? Like, I was collecting quotes, something I heard or something I created by myself, and then I was just like putting it into the book or the paper. And then eventually that somebody, I kind of shared it to someone else. And then I'm always like this, like I have always been very high energy person, very motivated, super positive, and people admired me for that, about that.
Yeah.
So there was always an idea that I could do something or business or whatever in whatever the form that's related to like my opinion basis. I just didn't know how or what. But a couple people like started suggesting me that I should probably write a book or something like that, just to kind of like kickstart with whatever I wanted to do at that time. And then, yeah, so it was actually last year, 2019, probably like December or something like that. I initially started having an idea. And then from there, I'm more about execution practicality. So when I have idea, like that's enough for me. Like I'm just going to do it. And then I figure out as I go kind of person. So, next month or two, I knew I was going to do it. So I just did it.
So this was in 2019?
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to write the book? Had you ever written anything before?
No, I didn't. But I think I always have been very expressive person. I mean, when I was like 6 or 7 years old, this was in Japan. I even wrote the essay without any, right? Like without teacher telling me to do it or anything like that. I just wrote what I thought about an event that I had the other day. And then I brought it to school like that. I was that kind of kid. So I never really hated writing. Actually, it's actually the opposite. I liked writing. And it took me about 4 to 5 months. I would say 5. 5 months.
Writing every day or every other day? What was your writing schedule like?
Yeah, well, most of the days I did write every day. That was because we also had that. Wait, Corona, was it starting at the time already? Kind of.
Started at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020.
Right.
That's at least here in the UK. We started to hear about it at
Right.
the beginning of 2020, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we started from like February or something like that. And at the time, like I also had like two things, and one of the thing was the book. So yeah, pretty much most of the day, I during the Corona time, I did write every day.
And what's the other thing? You said you had two things.
Oh, the clothing stuff that I was.
Oh, right, cool. Yeah, are you still doing that?
Yeah, but I decided to take a little bit of time off. But actually, I made that as my kit company for the other company I'm starting, or I'm not starting. Well, the other company I have.
Okay, so you had these collection of quotes. You had this, you seem to have this positive intent instilled within you, and you took all of that to write every day and then achieve this goal. And how are you feeling now about it? Now that the book's out there in the world, like, are you just on to the next project very quickly? Did you take a break afterwards and just reflect on it? How do you feel about the book itself and how it's been received?
No, the reactions are pretty good. It's just the best feeling when people tell me that I helped them in any way, right? And a lot of people actually DM'd me or like emailed me or whatever, like just contacted me to say and thank me for the book.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I understand that it's not about me, I still like get happiness out of it. And I like a super great sense of gratitude for it. Like it's amazing. But yeah, I'm not really taking on new projects because I'm not a sprinter. Like I don't treat things as like let's get it done, right? I mean, in micro, yeah, I do treat some things that let's get it done kind of manner. But for things that matters to me a lot, I like to spend time, and then actually I want to treat them with significance. So right now, with the book, I'm going on to like different podcasts, touring, and just promoting and stuff like that, and basically building up on the more present around it, and also just pushing the idea because I think this is just really positive idea that anyone can benefit from, regardless of my egoistic ambition or anything, because I frankly, for when it comes to this mission, I really don't have it. So yeah, I'm just trying to create good cause.
Yeah, I'll tell anyone that's obviously I'll link to this in the show notes, and the book is The Game of Self-Domination. But what I would say is what I found so far. Again, I read a lot of content in this same field, but this is very practical. So the biggest difference I've found between this and other books in this field is this is very practical. So if you struggle with frameworks, if you struggle with getting started, if you struggle with staying on track, I'm just over halfway in the book at the moment as I'm reading, and I would say that this is the kind of book that will give you that level of information or that level of process that might help you and steer you in the right direction. So it's definitely a practical book, I would say.
Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, that's another point. Like I really, once again, like, it's all about being helpful. So I don't mind like whatever the form of the book is, as long as the book helps someone. That's a value. But at the same time, like what I wanted was like I needed to create belief and in the faith in people. So for that reason, I needed my book to be more practical than just things that just sounds good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And something that's interesting, because you are obviously you are productive, and you've talked about multiple different businesses and doing things for your own positive energy, such as reading and watching videos and all of this stuff. You're obviously paying a lot of attention to this, and I think about this quite a lot, and it's something that I've thought about I remember thinking about this since I was a teenager, is that to achieve those things that you want to achieve and to stay focused on that positive intent, that positive energy, there are sacrifices. So, and I guess it just depends how you frame those sacrifices. So for me, that's been, I went a really long time without drinking any alcohol. I never used to go out drinking, so I just didn't do that for a long time. There are certain things in life that I can't fit in because I'm too focused on this, whatever it is that I want to do, this project that I want to work on. Have you had to make any I'm calling them sacrifices. It depends how you look at them, but have you had to? I guess, do you have a different life to your peers in any way?
Sacrifices, yeah, as you refer, I guess when you say like that, like it sounds like something that goes against you. But personally, how I want to look at it is more like standard. Like because you're a leader, like you need to be capable of handling things that people don't want to handle. That's how kind of I look at it instead of sacrifice.
Yeah, I think it took me a while to get to that, I guess. Or it took me a while to get comfortable with that. I think when I was a lot younger, particularly in my kind of as a teenager, I used to, because you worried because there's the social element of life that's very different as you get into your 20s and then and so forth. But I think as you're a teenager, you think about everything that you're going to miss out on. You get really bad FOMO. That's all it is. And I think it takes a while to come to terms with that. But over time, I started to realize that it gave me a kind of inner strength or a core strength that was very different to that of my peers, and that's what I've gained over time.
Like it's so, discipline, but at the same time, I would say that I think there's two ways to look at it. For me, deploying discipline works. Like discipline way works fine for me, so I don't necessarily have to go the other way anymore. But there are points of time and situations in life where you don't need the discipline. Like it's more like self-awareness that you need, which is if you actually want something genuinely, like just want to have fun, like do it. Like why are you blaming yourself for doing that? Like you're just living, like you're being happy.
That's
like,
the other thing.
That's it. Like so I think another thing I talk very strongly about also in my book is like don't blame yourself, because blaming doesn't produce anything. Once again, it's like very similar to the idea of like dwelling on your losses and failure. So in order for you to stay practical, like things don't have a meaning. Like we are the human beings with emotions and beings that like dramas or particular emotions, right? Like we are the one who's attaching meaning to things that they don't need to have meanings. And this is actually something I mentioned toward the end of the book, so you'll probably get to it later on.
Good.
But yeah, it's just us who's trying to create meaning. So just because you went out and had a good time, like that's you who's creating the reason to blame yourself and feeling bad about it. But in reality, what happened was you went out, had a drink. That's it. Like you didn't do anything wrong. Like
Yeah.
the event that happened, and there's no meaning attached to it. So for me, because I like to stay the route of practicality, when I, like, for example, when I fuck up with clients or business or anything, I just don't dwell on my losses and failure. I don't blame on myself. I'm just willing to start from where I am and pick myself up and keep going.
That makes a lot of sense as well. And I'm kind of curious when you're talking about a lot of what you said comes back to discipline. And when you're writing a book, you have to have discipline to write every day. And were you also consuming a lot of content, like watching, reading, as you were writing as well? Or were you trying not to do that stuff because you were worried it would influence you too much? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So did you want it some people say that when they're writing a book, they tune out from everything else because they're worried that it will influence what they're writing. What was your style? What was your approach?
I think, I listened to different stuff. I did a lot of researches too, to kind of like come up with the evidence to make my statement stronger. So in that sense, I actually did a lot of like researching. And once again,
that was going to be another one of my questions actually, because I thought we might touch on research.
Good.
But no, carry on if you had a statement to make.
No, I think I'm gonna leave it there for now.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the research point, I just wanted to ask if was there anything that came up in your process of the research for this book that kind of mesmerized you, that opened your eyes, that you just thought was amazing and something that you didn't know before?
I would say definitely brain conditioning chapter. I included, basically this chapter I talk about how reality is not reality, and how reality is what we perceive with all the reality is brain hallucination. That's what I mentioned in the brain conditioning chapter. And, I saw a couple of studies that talk about it in more detail and how that is, right, basically. And it just made a lot of sense. And this is just how the idea I already had, but because I elaborated on that a little bit more with outsourced research, with like actual, like, coming from actual like academic field, that just like confirmed me more of the belief that I had. And yeah, that was interesting. Should I go on to the specific study, or can I just leave it there? Because it's kind of like a little bit
but it's funny
concept.
It's funny you say that. So I'm looking at the time here, and I know I've only got you for a short amount of time, and we've got a few minutes left. Are you okay to carry on over, or do you have to wrap up?
No, yeah. I actually want to make it mysterious so that people can be interested in what I spoke about, because this is one of the things that you would benefit more if you know the full picture instead of me giving you a little bit of it.
In which case, like I said, I'll link to the book in the show notes and people can figure out the rest of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a reminder, it's the chapter on brain conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, Natsune, are you okay for a couple of minutes longer, or do you need to go?
I'm good, which is good.
Okay, I won't be too much long. I won't take too much of your time, but there are a couple of other things that I'm still curious about.
Yeah.
So I'll move on to a few other things. So I was also interested because you're studying, as you're doing a lot of this research, and I imagine this is just an area you're interested in, is high achievers or successful, in quotation marks, people, whatever success is. And I'm just interested to know, you sound like someone that studies a lot, and you sound like someone that tests themselves a lot with different frameworks from other people. And I'm interested to know two questions here. Who do you find, just number one, who do you find yourself checking in with most? So who do you kind of follow on social media that's inspiring to you and that has remained inspiring for a very long time?
For a very long time, I must say Tony Robbins.
Yep.
I don't know, something about him. Like his just energy is so amazing. I can tell that he's super giving person. He gave me a lot of inspiration in life.
Yeah.
How many do you need? How many do you want?
3. Go for 3.
Go for 3. Okay. Recently, I've been checking a lot about Gary Vee because,
Yep.
he's a business influencer. The third person, I would say, actually, I have a lot of people, I would have to say. Let's see. The third person, I would have to go with Tom Bilyeu.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
Impact Theory. Yeah, Tom is pretty cool too. I like how I can tell that he spends a lot of time. Each time he introduces guests to his show, I noticed that he spends a lot of time building up that intro for each guest. He's a very thoughtful person, I noticed.
In terms of, I'm curious about your routine.
Yeah.
So you're on social media quite a lot, and I assume to kind of find this content, to consume this content. What's your favorite form of? Do you have a favorite form of consuming this content? So do you read a lot? Do you watch a lot? Do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of kind of like a BGM, but I just like play it all the time on video form or the podcast form, so that I don't have to. I can do other things in the same time. But I pretty much do that anytime I can find.
I am curious to know, because you must receive so much information. Is there anything that, I guess I always have 2 more questions. This is the problem. I always have so many questions, more questions than answers.
That's intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, it is curious. I am definitely curious.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have so many questions that I forget what I'm going to ask.
That happens to me too.
My brain is on to the next question before I've even asked the first one. I get that a lot on podcasting. I guess my first question, actually, let me say this while it's in my head. My first question was, has there been any advice that you've received from, whether it's Tony Robbins or Gary Vee, that you've tried to apply to your life, but it just hasn't worked?
Hasn't worked?
Yeah, so you just, for whatever reason, you've tried to apply the advice or you've tried to apply the framework, but it just hasn't resonated with you.
I don't know. I think maybe when I was younger, when I heard maybe some of the things that they said, I didn't necessarily understand what they said. But I think overall, many things in the end, I think it came to practice. Like, for example, Gary has a lot of characteristic, right? Like, personality. And sometimes he can come across very strong personality. So I think from the beginning, I never hated him. Not at all. Like, I liked him. But like, my first impression versus now, it's a little bit different. Like, now I resonate a lot of things he say, versus like before, maybe I hesitated a little bit more just because of the nature of how he come across with his personality. But overall, I think many things over time, maybe I learned a little bit more and more of what they said.
Because this is an interesting area as well to me, is that when you read a lot of, I'm going to call it self-help or self-motivational content, a lot of people can get caught up in the game of just reading and consuming without taking any action. Because I've been in that place as well myself. Is that something that you've ever dealt with, where you're kind of consuming so much content that actually you realize you're not taking action on your own goals or your own dreams?
I don't think so.
Or you found the balance?
I value my priority. The highest priority is productivity. So I do everything based on that. Like, I don't do, if I'm not producing, like, nothing matters to me. So I don't do anything to destroy my productivity. Everything I do is to draw back to productivity. So I don't think I've suffered from that necessarily.
No, that's interesting. And just to close out, because you've been very generous with your time, and I know we don't have too much time left together. Maybe another podcast in the future. There'll be so many questions, I'm sure. But I'm curious to know the last thing that you watched or read, or a resource that really motivated you, and maybe it changed your perception on something. Maybe it led you down a new path of curiosity. What was the last thing that you remember watching or reading or consuming that really gave you a lot of energy?
So Tony said, sorry, Tony said that, you know, your life is so much more meaningful when you have something to give, and something to give because you grow so much that giving is no longer painful. And that quote gave me an idea about abundance, right? That idea gave me motivation to create this another video. Actually, I created a video based on that. I invited my friend. He's a Swedish entrepreneur in Tokyo, and he has his own company, and he's a very futuristic person. So we spoke about the ultimate form of humanity and how in the future there will be no point in demand and supply, because there's going to be 1,000 times more supply in relation to demand, that there's going to be abundance for our resources and for our needs, anything needs. So at that point, there's no arbitrage between supply and demand. And then that's when we can truly unlock the ultimate form of humanity, which is the world where giving is basically the currency of whatever we do.
That's the perfect end to this podcast. Natsune, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And before I let you go, though, do you want to let the listeners know where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, so my name is Natsune Oki. My book is The Game of Self-Domination. You can find it from my website. You can also buy it from Amazon. My website is LifeUpEducationTV.com. You can find me also on the same name, LifeUpEducationTV. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn.
Perfect. I found myself checking in with your TikTok content for the motivational kind of energy
Thank you.
quite regularly.
Wow, that means so much to me. Thank you so much.
And like I said, I'm just over halfway through your book, and I'd highly recommend it for anyone that's kind of grappling or just curious about the topics that we've been discussing today. Mm-hmm. So go check that out too. And like I said, thank you so much. It's been a really interesting podcast, and hopefully I look forward to catching up with you again in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.